So I'll start again. So thanks all for coming. I'll put the live stream on so we can record it. As you know, this is a meeting for Colin to come up and tell us about the Michigan community, of which we already are part, and to tell us about some of the difficulties, but hopefully also about some of the advantages and some of the positive aspects of the Michigan community of which we are part of. I'm recording it so that anyone who's not here can watch it later. Colin wants to do a little bit of a pitch, he said, and then have a lot of time for questions and answers. We're going to try and finish in about an hour. If you have a question, please can you use a microphone so that we can get it onto the recording, so that the people at home, people who can't be here, can hear what you said. I've got 2 microphones and I'll come and pass them round. So I don't think, do we need to introduce Colin? Does everybody know who Colin is? Yes, Steve? Yeah, you do? Good, okay. So Colin, very welcome. And Colin's going to talk about Michigan community, so I'll leave it to you. Okay?
Thank you very much.
You turn on?
I think so, am I? Is that on? Yes. I'm not entirely sure whether it is or it isn't, but seems to be. Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for the invitation to come and talk with you, really. Just to say, yes, my name's Colin, Area Dean of Salford and Lee Deanery. I've been here a few times during the vacancy, and it's been an absolute delight, actually. I've really enjoyed myself when I come here on a Sunday. It's been fantastic. But I also came about a year ago, well, just a bit more than a year now, when we did a series of presentations on mission communities. Now, some of you may have been a part of that, and my guess is that a lot of you probably weren't. So Stephen kindly invited me to come and share something about what mission communities are about, what it's about in Lee as a mission community, and particularly how it might involve all of you. Now, I did think whether a PowerPoint presentation would have been appropriate, and I decided against it. Those of you who've been a year or so ago will know that I'm very keen on doing PowerPoints, but it can be death by PowerPoint, can't it? So tonight really is about me making a short pitch on just to position it, and then for us to get talking, really, for you to ask me questions. That's why Stephen's got these mics. Does that sound like a plan? And my ultimate goal, really, is to enthuse you all with the idea of mission communities and the idea of what this church, Christ Church, what you could do and participate in it. Now, I can't guarantee that that's going to be the outcome, but I will do my level best to give you some of the very positive and encouraging news about what we're trying to do. That has to be balanced with reality. It has to be balanced with reality of what we know the pandemic has done, for instance, and how churches out there of all forms are battling away, but nevertheless struggling. We need to paint the picture of what the backdrop is. And I know from conversations I've had here before that the assumption is sometimes, oh, Christ Church, it's a big church, it's got loads of resources. Well, I know, well, you are blessed actually with having a fair amount of resources better than others, but I also know that those headlines don't tell the whole story. You're struggling as well. And you said that to me a few times, I know, and a few people have said just how challenging and difficult it is. So I want to acknowledge that too. Is that all right? So just very briefly, and it is only briefly, 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up. I, along with 6 other area deans, were recruited in 2021. 4 came from within the Manchester diocese, and 3 came from the outside. I was from Derby diocese. And we all joined together, and the aim was that for each area dean would look after one of the new super deaneries, one of the big, large deaneries, and Salford and Lee Deanery is one of those. And that's my full-time role now, so I'm not in parish ministry anymore. And the idea was that we would begin to talk with the deanery, with parishes, with benefices about the transformation programme that the diocese has put in place, which ostensibly, if you cut through it all, is about growing churches, growing new disciples, nurturing people in the faith, and serving our communities. So it's about growing, nurturing, serving. If you cut all that down, all the paperwork that's been put out on this, that is what we're trying to do. But we're trying to do it in collaboration with each other. What we've managed to achieve through decades and decades and probably even centuries of the way that the Church of England is and has been, was created a culture which first of all relies on this. And I'm not saying that's true here because I know you've got a lot of lay leadership. But everybody looks to this. You know, the professional, to run everything, do the services, preach. And we were just having a conversation about preaching, about laity, preaching, and how challenging that is to get authorised for it. Well, we know from the financial struggles that the Church of England are having, and that is true of all dioceses everywhere, and I mean everywhere, the numbers of clergy are, or have been steadily reducing. This diocese is operating on a probably £1.5 million deficit budget, and has been doing so for several years. And that is in common and in line with a lot of other dioceses. It's exactly the same. So local parish struggles for finance are mirrored in the diocese and are mirrored in the national church. We are only keeping going, to be honest, because of the sale of redundant vicarages, which the property department are undertaking, support from the church commissioners, which has been substantial, to keep going, especially through the pandemic, but not just because of that. And the other thing, really, is because we have hitting our reserves as a diocese. But, £1.5 million deficit, operating deficit each year, is not sustainable. So the whole numbers of clergy are reducing. And that is partly why this transformation programme was put in place, why mission communities were put in place. If you strip out all of that, all of it, I want to say, actually, that what we really want to do is to get back to the New Testament, what I understand to be the New Testament way of being church. The New Testament way of being church. Paul had his problems, didn't he? But he established churches, and then he left and went on to do it again somewhere else. He had to write to them. He had to correct them sometimes. But always he loved them, and always he prayed for them. And in some ways, what I see at the moment with the reducing numbers of clergy is that we're trying to return to a model of church that says, you, all of us, whether we wear one of these or not, are mutually equal in the eyes of God because we are all baptized. That's the common factor that binds us all together. It's not about Jack Shepherd, when he comes, being the only person to lead you. You've done superbly well during this interregnum. I know there's a lot of people work very, very hard, actually, to try and keep things going. So I see it as a return to the New Testament and how we're supposed to be church. We've created silos as well. We've created little silos, some little, some large, where every church looks after itself, and we won't do mission and growth together because this is my church, this is where I go, which is fine. But what we're trying to do in mission communities is do what it says on the tin. We're trying to be missional in the sense of a community, to collaborate with others. Every person in this church, I am pretty sure, would love to see more people come to know and love the Lord Jesus Christ. That's what we're about, is to proclaim him. And to feed the poor, to visit the sick, to visit the prison, to clothe the naked. You know, this is our call, is it not? To grow people in the faith, to disciple people. And we can no longer do that in our own silos. Now, we've got some exciting visions and plans for this mission community in Lee. There's some fantastic things that we think we can do, but we're encouraging you to participate in that. That's the pitch tonight, is to say, will you join us, please? Because we think you can actually have a tremendous impact with your gifts and your skills and your knowledge and what you're doing. So that's my pitch, and I will be quiet now, and I will invite questions, and I will do my level best, good people, to answer you honestly, and whether I don't know the answer, I will say so. Is that okay?
So who's got the first question? Okay. Also, thank you, Colin, for coming.
Come on, you've got questions. You must do so. Yes. Well, okay.
Do we need so many actual church buildings in our area?
What a start. That's what I like. Yes, let's get to the nitty-gritty straight away. The truth is, we do not need. The one thing I forgot to mention in the growing, nurturing, serving equation is one more, and we call that sustainability. This is true, by the way, not just in Lee, but it's true across this deanery, and it's true across the diocese and in many, many other places. We have too many buildings, we have too few people in them, serving too... Yes, so the answer is yes. So part of our strategic aim is to have conversations with locally, and this will be PCC level usually, about the fragility of some of those churches and the long-term sustainability. That, as you can imagine, is a very delicate area to get into for obvious reasons. We need to tread very carefully and respectfully, which we try and do. But our aim is to have honest conversations. I was in Eccles last week, where the members of the PCC and wardens and others gathered, and we had that very same conversation. They've got 4 churches, and my question to them was, is it sustainable? And we had a very mature and honest conversation. So yes, part of the work that we need to do together is be honest and address these issues. And maybe, and only PCCs can do this, by the way, it's important to state, there'll be no imposition of church closures because we have no powers to do that. Closure of churches can only begin by the PCC agreeing that that's the direction they want to move in. And then there's a whole raft of consultations. But yes, we're going to have to do something about that.
If we were to close churches, what happens when we're supposed to go out and evangelize? So if we close the churches, where we're going to put the people, hopefully the extra people that we get, we're going to have no place for them to worship.
Good question. My question back to you, rhetorically, is does a gathering of church need to happen in a place like this? Because part of our strategic conversation is to have a church planting strategy. Now, Bishop Matthew, who's our new Bishop of Bolton, comes with extraordinary credentials in church planting. He was consecrated a week or so ago, and we want to tap into his thinking. But to plant a church might mean going onto an estate, which we plan to do actually in Shackley and Higher Folds, We've already appointed somebody to plan. They're already at work on the community to do that. So you don't need a building like this necessarily. We are hoping that we can build contextual churches relevant for the community in which we're set. So the attraction model of saying, let's come to a building, still stands. And where that works, we want to make it, we'll pray mightily that it will flourish. But not necessarily does it always have to be in an established building. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, to an extent.
Just wait for the mic.
I'll borrow this one.
Okay.
I'll borrow this one here. It does to an extent, yes, but we've already got the buildings, so is the cost of maintaining them too much to... Is that what we're saying?
Oh, yes. Some buildings have got £500,000, £1 million bills that they feed to fix a hole in a roof, with 20 people who go into it every Sunday, with a bank balance that's almost nil, with no prospect of ever going for the grants that are available because there's nobody in the church to be able to do it. So yes, it is significant. Some of our buildings are collapsing.
Right.
They're only, a lot of them are only red brick ones, you see, because in the red brick ones, rather than stone, were only built, most of them were built in the Victorian age. They've done their 150 years service. They've had it, to be honest. So yes, it's a real struggle.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I think my question has more or less been answered now by what you said. I was wondering, you're talking just across Anglican churches? You're not talking across denominations at all?
In terms of closure or collaborative work?
Well, no, collaborative ministry.
We're certainly not excluding ecumenical partners in any missional or growth ambitions that we may develop. We would love to include them. Generally speaking, we have conversations within the Church of England parishes, but where there are strong ecumenical relations already, let's keep going. Let's bless that. Let's use that. Let's work together, because that's exactly the New Testament model. It doesn't matter what flavour you are, does it? No. Buildings-wise, I think whatever the Methodists or others need to do, they're doing anyway. They're doing it at a faster rate than we are, to be honest. They're shutting a lot of chapels at the moment. Many of them have gone already. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
This gentleman as well afterwards.
Right. Hi.
Ken? Sorry.
Sorry? Do you want to go?
No, you go.
Right, okay. Really practical questions. The first question is, do you know when we're going to get a new vicar?
Yes.
When
you say...
When it will be?
When he'll arrive?
Yes.
No.
When he's going to step in the building, feet on the floor, doing the job. Do we know?
Circa August-ish. That's the best I can give you. And the reason for that... Right, okay, I said to be honest. There is work, I think, on the vicarage, isn't there?
They're ahead of schedule already.
Are they? Good, right. So there's work on the vicarage,
right.
And it won't surprise you to know, if you've had any work done on your own properties, if you're lucky enough to have one, just how challenging it is to get contractors. Well, the diocese is facing the same problem. Mm. So that's the hold-up at the moment, but we think... September, yeah?
Just say about the vicarage is that we had a meeting with the Archdeacon and 3 surveyors from the diocese Tuesday before last, and they've agreed a certain amount of work. The painters started yesterday, and they ripped the bathroom out the day before yesterday, and they've actually started putting the new one in today, and they promised it finished by the end of July. So we're already, only just into July, aren't we? And they've done most of the work. So for once... we're actually, the building work's going ahead of schedule.
Right.
That's good.
That's very good. Thank you. The second question, which is linked to that, when Jack arrives, what proportion of his time will be allocated to mission communities? Is that something to be decided, or has it been decided?
It has not been decided, no. And there's no formal... 2 days, 3 days, 4 kind of split at all. That will be negotiation between yourselves, for obvious reasons, and to some extent me as well, and the Archdeacon, because we would clearly want Jack to be involved in everything that I've just painted. That the whole question about how do we do mission and growth together? How do we collaborate together? How do we grow the kingdom? How do we encourage people to come to know Jesus? Well, we want to do that across this town and across this mission community. And Jack is going to be a key person to develop those conversations across this mission community. So I can't tell you with any authority or clarity what kind of time that will take. But, and I recognize how difficult this is for everybody, because I think that is the most pressing question that's probably on your minds. Will this take away Jack from serving you? And will it detract from all the plans and things that you want to do? I want to challenge all of you this evening by saying, or by reverting back to, or going back to the place I started at, was that Jack is here to oversee your work, to develop your missional work, to grow and with you. I want to say that he's not here to do it all. And I would invite you to share that load with him. Jack is going to need a great deal of support. And I mean that in the kindest, gentlest way. He's going to have a lot on his plate, bless him. He really is. And I've seen too many people collapse under the weight of ministry. And he's going to need that help. And at the interview, I agreed as mission community, as area dean, to help and support him in the mission community work, to walk that journey with him, not just say, there you are, Jack, mate, off you go. And I will do what I can to walk that with him. But it needs you as well, my friends. It needs you to actually say, do you know what? We love this vision. It's exciting. It's different. We can participate in something bigger than ourselves. Let's support him and one another to get it done.
The third question I was going to ask you then is, I understand what you've just said. He is going to need practical support, admin support, management support. It's not the right word, but to help what's going on, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's about people. It's not about the other thing. Is there any planned support mechanism in terms of, you know, I don't know, the meetings that will be required, the admin that would be required, all that sort of stuff?
On the mission community side?
Yes.
I can't see an awful lot of admin being needed. Interestingly, tomorrow, we've got all the mission community leaders who are appointed across this diocese going to St. John's House, as it now is, in Bury, for a full day kind of review of how it's going. All three bishops will be there. I'll be there, all the area deans will be there, the archdeacons will be there. And it's a pity you're not there. No, unfortunately it won't be. Well, I don't think he's going to be there. But I'll be watching to see what it is, what struggles they're having locally. From my observation, and this is just an observation, of the 30-odd mission communities that are out there, and I think more or less all mission community leaders are appointed. And they're all appointed from people who are already parish priests, doing the tremendous job that parish priests do, and having this as an extra load on them. Most are coping reasonably well, but my question is this: how effective are they? Really? How effective are they really? And I think there is a question about the effectiveness of them. Not the heart. The heart wants to do it. But the reality is, can I do it with everything else I've got on my plate? And I'm just being very honest, I don't know the answer to that. All I'm trying to do, I think, is walk that journey with the mission community leaders that we've got in this deanery and support them. But just one final thing. I think The truth is this, that the progress on mission communities is far, far slower than I would like. Many in the diocese at kind of senior level, and I'm not one of those, believe that it's okay to make slow, steady progress. I mean, the spiritual gift of patience, I guess, is not something I'm blessed with, and I pray about that a lot. I want to just say, let's get on with it. Let's do more. But the reality is it's not happening like that across the diocese as I would like. Is that okay? Or it answers your question, or at least it's the best answer I can give you. It's going to be hard, is what I want to say. Yes.
I'm glad you commented about the speed of things. Do you think the commissioners are doing enough to raise finance? And what I'm thinking about here, you were going on about closing church buildings. There was a lovely building in Bedford that's been allowed to be completely dilapidated, has been sat there for years and years, and I'm sure finance could have been realised by somebody doing something 5 years ago about that building.
You mean as a church or as something?
The church itself, it's been closed up, but it's just been allowed to.
St Thomas, yeah. Interestingly, that's been on my agenda this week, so I'm very averse to what's going on there at the moment, and it is in a state, you're quite right.
The reason I ask that is just round the corner from where I live in Atherton, there was a church in Eynsford which was closed, and within about 12 months, the building was actually in use and had been gutted on the inside, and flats or whatever, something for the community had been made.
Is that Church of England or something else?
Yes, it was.
Oh, interestingly. Right, okay.
And yet,
Right.
probably more than 5 years.
It puzzles me why I hear stories about one church being dealt with very swiftly, and yet almost all others. I mean, Helen Platt's the diocesan secretary, or chief operating officer, I'm not sure of the title, it's probably both, will say that they've got a list of churches they want to sell, but selling them is not straightforward. Church of England law and legislation and everything else. So there's a heart to do it, but the challenge is enormous. I can't give you an answer to that. I only know that I agree with you, it is in a mess.
And St Thomas is actually for sale at the moment if you want to buy it.
It is for sale, yes. They have buyers going round it, I'm told. So put your bid in.
Debbie's next, then you.
Yeah, going back to a bit what Jim was talking about and Jack's role, it just seems to me that the mission community is about relationships. Oh, isn't it on? Okay. The mission community is about relationships. And so to me, it'll be really important for him to be given space to get to know us in the church before he does anything else.
Yes.
Because otherwise we can't go forward with him and back him, and he won't know what on earth's going on here.
Fantastic point, thank you. We appointed in January of this year, again, somebody from the outside who went into Earlham and Cadizad, who'd been appointed mission community leader. That person came from Cumbria, Carlisle Diocese. And he made it clear, and rightly so, that he needed at least 3 to 4 months in his own parishes without any interference from me on the mission community in order to establish himself there, quite rightly. And we would want to honour Jack and you by giving you the same commitment. If he doesn't come till August, September, in truth, I can't see anything happening on the mission communities this year. I would want to have conversations with him about it this year, but I think I would leave him alone to build the relationships with you for at least 3 months the autumn period, if not a bit longer. But come 2024, I think we would need a more nuanced kind of focus on it. So I agree with you. That will be the commitment that I will give you tonight, that we don't interfere with his relationships with you for at least 3 months, if not more.
Yes, I was just thinking about supporting Jack. In the deanery plan for Mission Community 1, I think there were 6 stipendiary posts mentioned. How many stipendiary posts have we got at the moment in Mission Community 1?
I think it's 5, actually, if I was truthful. Let me just consult my...
Just while Colin's consulting, I don't know if you've heard the news, but if Jack doesn't come till August, then there's going to be a period in August when every church in Lee is in vacancy.
Well, vacancies are a struggle. Yeah. They really are. And Kevin Crinks, of course, has announced his departure from St Mary's. We've got Robert Eloff moving on from St Thomas. So it's not going to be easy. Right, the deanery the mission community allocation for Lee is a total of 5. Now we currently have 6. We did have 6. That's right, in the 21 plan, but that's going to be moving to 5. I'll tell you where they're going to be. There's 1 in the Astley team. In fact, there's currently 2 in the Ashley team because Bishop Jonathan takes one of those posts. He's on a 3-year interim post at the moment, and that interim post will finish on or about April of 2026. There will be 1 in Atherton, which is Tracy, as a team rector. So she's in the Atherton team. Kevin, of course, at St Mary's, and we will replace him there, with it being a parish church. The 2 West Lee parishes, St Paul and St Peter, will remain in vacancy, and we're having conversations about them joining up with St Mary's, and that's in conversation at the moment with the wardens. And of course, here you've got Pennington. So in the kind of allocation of stipendiary posts that we now have, it'll be 5 across the Lee mission community as a total.
And how many churches is that?
13. I think there's 10.
10 churches.
10 churches.
13 worship centres, I think, is the... Yeah, sorry.
It's 10 parishes, 13 worship centres. Yes, now there's a bit... Yes. So you can see, can't you, why the current models won't work any longer. You can see why the struggle's out there. Why there are clergy on their knees, why there are laity and wardens and others working their socks off. But it can't carry on like that. Something has got to change. Hence why this transformation program's in place, why the area deans are here, why we're having this conversation, and what we want to do to get things working differently. Nobody likes change. You try and bring in change in a church, whoa! But we are going to have to change. We're going to have to change the service patterns. Not every church in a benefice can have communion every Sunday when you need one of these, apparently, to do it. It's just not going to happen. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
It's probably linked to...
We'll come back to you.
Sorry. It's probably linked to what Cyril was saying, but surely... Who is going to be part of all these teams? Aren't you going to be very dependent on volunteers? And we all know at the moment it's so difficult to get volunteers to do things. So where are all these people coming from?
Could you give me an example of what you mean by volunteering for what?
Well, just any of our activities in church. Like we sort of got Bridgewater's Cafe at one time, trying to get volunteers to sort of, take part in that was really difficult. And isn't that going to be the situation with these teams?
Yes, and yes. There is no easy answer to how we encourage participation. That has been true for years and years and years, and is still true now. So the changes we propose to make aren't going to make any difference to how much of a struggle it is to run your children's groups, this group, that group. This is where it relies on all of you, as well as Jack, to do the discipling work. Because when we truly know, when we sit down and we say to ourselves, I am here because I love the Lord Jesus Christ. He has called me, us, to him. And only when that penny drops of just how much he loves us and how much we love him do we make a response. And that response comes in the form of our giving. It comes in the response of our mission in the world. Our willingness to find what it is the Spirit has put in our hearts. Every person in this church today, every person anywhere who's given their life to Christ, not everybody in a church has. I think there are people who come because they like coming. You know, there's a difference between getting on your knees, isn't there? Praying the prayer of repentance and accepting Jesus in your life and just going to church and having a cup of tea at back. We welcome everybody. It doesn't matter how they come or what they come. We welcome them. I'm not saying we don't. But the moment you give your life to Christ in the way that we imagine is doable and we hope happens, is the moment the Holy Spirit gives us things. He gives us a passion for something. And I would ask us all, to answer your question, I think the idea is to get in touch with that passion. What's the passion the Spirit has given you? It could be children's work, it could be feeding the poor, it could be visiting residential homes, it could be dealing with addiction. And quite often, that vocation comes from your own life experiences. Often. I'll give you one example. I've not named the person at all, but there's one example of a person I know in Lee who had a challenge with addiction years ago. That person's call is to work with those people because that person knows what it's like. That's the kind of passion that we want to unearth. That's where you're going to get your volunteers from because the Holy Spirit will do the work. Now, judging by the body language right now, not everybody believes that. But I do. Everybody has it who's given their life to Christ. And my challenge to all of us tonight is, what is it for you? What has the Spirit put in your heart, sir? That you feel you just have to do because that is your call. You don't have to wear one of these to do it. It could be children's work. It could be anything. You're not convinced, are you? If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's just, but pray about it.
I was going to go Polly.
Yeah, Colin, my question, when you were talking about getting back to what the church, the New Testament church, which is the priesthood of all believers, which we're not. Well, we are, but you talked about the collar, and you talked then about things like the sacraments. So if we've got increasingly less clergy among our communities, where do we get to a point where the sacraments really are rare, when we're not going to get access to that? Because we know where it's been through the interregnum without not having any ordained people in our church. We've really struggled to get communion, at least in the main service, at least once a month, and that's been by the good graces of people like yourself and our retired clergy supporting us, which we really appreciate. And our baptisms, like Kevin's done them for us, without him we'd have been really struggling. So, if you think about that, a lot among this big community where you've got 13 churches and 5 ordained people, how do we go on?
This is one of the hard realities. you see, where the sacrament of communion really, really matters to a church, and society churches, our Catholic brothers and sisters, would probably want to argue this point far more powerfully than I can, where the Mass is seen as crucially important, not just once a week, but every day, or at least 2 or 3 times a week. For them, it's hugely challenging, this. So I want to own that, and I want to say I've got no easy answers for that. And I respect it. From my own position as an evangelical, it's not as crucial to me as it is to some of my colleagues and brothers and sisters in Christ. And the reality is that in Lee Mission Community, in Atherton, for instance, I know that Tracy Marshall has had to reconfigure the service patterns amongst her 4 churches, and not every church will get communion every week. That's the way it is. It's upset a lot of people. But she's taken those people on a journey. Now, Jack will have to, you see, you're fortunate in one sense that you've just got the one church. But what we're asking now of our clergy is to be strategic thinkers, is to be change, I don't want that word change managers, I hate that word manager, but, you know, who facilitators of change. And for somebody like Jack, that's why I'm saying we need to support him, because he's going to have a lot on his plate here. I'll give you you're too generous and kind for this to happen here. But in other places, I know that people who, for instance, young people coming out of curacy into a major post have been eaten alive by the people, okay? You have a tremendous responsibility here to look after him. He's a great guy. We would not have appointed him had we did not think this person is for you. He can do wonderful things with you. He's fantastic. But support him. The wider question about how do we implement these changes? How do we change service patterns? How do you have services of the word here as opposed to communion every week when people value? I mean, here it's not so bad you've got one church, but you can imagine the problem when you've got 4 churches in a benefice with one person chasing around. And we know that church growth happens. Bob Jackson, if you want to read Bob Jackson's work, he's done a lot of work on church growth. But he's also written about what we call focal leadership, focal ministry, and that's something else we're coming to, which might come back to your question, how do we get them? Part of our strategy as a diocese is to appoint focal leaders, focal ministers into churches. Focal minister does not have to be ordained, more likely to be lay. That person will be the go-to person, the person that everybody turns to. I wonder whether, just as an example, who's the person that you all turn to for questions? Who is, go on, is that person present tonight? You. The person is here. The person, right, don't name that person then. But there is somebody here who everybody turns to for the answers, for this, that, and the other, for advice, whatever it may be. As long as it's not safeguarding, so that has to go to the proper person. Those are the kind of people we want as focal leaders. You may not have heard that term before. Google it. Find out. There's loads of stuff on the Diocese of Manchester about focal leadership. We are moving towards a model where clergy become oversight ministers, and the running of the day-to-day church is run by the people with a focal leader in place. Now, we're a long, long way from that, a long way. But these are the kind of changes that we're asking from our clergy. That's going to be their role. So I can't answer your question specifically because it's hard and it causes all kinds of mayhem out there when these kind of changes happen. But this is what a mission community is trying to facilitate together. If you finally got hold of that, Mike, well done, young man.
I have, yeah. I've finally got hold of it. It's generally a supplementary from Pauline's question. It's just, basically building on what you've just said, how do we, as churches, recognise those people that have those callings, and how do we fast-track them through the diocese to be authorised to actually go out there into the community and do those missions?
There are two answers to that. And okay, one of those answers is, for certain types of ministries, yes, you need to be authorised by the bishop. And yet, we were talking about this earlier, reader ministry or ALM ministry, something of that order. And yes, you need either a certificate or a licence or an authorisation from the bishop to do it. Fast tracking, ALM course is a year, readership I think is 2 years. There's no circumventing that if you want fully licensed reader ministry. Particularly in the safeguarding, we have to now ensure that those who stand up in public, doing public ministries in the church, are properly authorised by the bishop and properly hold the correct safeguarding DBSs and training and all those things. We cannot, you know why we can't. Those things are so important. But if it's in the world, if it's ministry outside of this building, you don't need a certificate to do that. My encouragement to you is that discipleship is about how do we grow, how do we be disciples in the world. The report that came out from General Synod in 2017 called Setting God's People Free. Google it, Setting God's People Free. Back in 2017, it was the start of something which said we need to disciple people 24/7 so that, I don't mean we sit in front of them teaching them 24/7, I mean that they become disciples in the world in their everyday lives. There's an example of a teacher who said that a teacher comes, I think she said, she came and she's part of the intercession team, and she prays for people, the world, the church and everything else. But she said, nobody prays for me in my job, in the struggles that I'm having every single day in the local school. She said, that's what we're trying to do in More Than Sunday. You may have heard the diocesan phrase about more than Sunday. This grew out of Setting God's People Free. There's a strategy in the diocese, and part of what mission communities are about is developing, discipling people so that they can be Christians in the world. So you can have your conversations with people. What role, do you have a job, sir?
Analyst, sorry.
You're an analyst?
Yeah, I'm an analyst, yeah. Statistics, yeah. I mean, I was going to come back anyway. What I was going to say, I understand, obviously, you've got to do the safeguarding and got to be authorised for public ministry. It's just making sure that those people that go in those roles have the support, ongoing training. I mean, when you look at the missional plan, do you go, well, that church is very sacramental ministry related. We're going to really need to make sure that they get the support they need. This church, obviously, youth orientated. They need more authorised leaders for youth and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've got no easy answers for this, but this is the journey mission communities are on. I can't give you nice, lovely textbook answers, but I am asking for your support to join this journey so that you can join the conversation. Because let me take, do you go into Loughton High School?
Yes.
Because I'd love to see Loughton High School have a youth hub, if you haven't got one already. Susie Maple-Dorham, who's the kind of youth, diocesan youth officer, she's been having conversations in Salford Mission Community about building youth hubs. And what we're trying to do is get into high schools. Now, I know Loughton is partly in Chester Diocese, isn't it? It's really weird where the boundary is. But there are exciting plans that we've got, and you have got the connections there. It would be criminal if we don't invite...
Just to say, we actually have the chaplain from Loughton High School sitting here.
Oh! Isn't God wonderful? You see, oh, yes. I mean, I could speak for hours about the plans we've got for those connections. Now, you've already got relationships and connections. As well? Oh, even better, you see? Oh, okay. This is why we need you. This is why the invitation has come to you. This is why we want you to say, yes, Colin, we'll sign up to this. There's this paper here with your signature. No, there isn't. But you know what I mean? We've got some really, but we can't do it without you. And there are all the concerns about what the effect on Jack and what it will mean. And I get that. But we can work this out together, good people. Can't we? You've got so much to offer. When we were at the interview, and Jack was there, I did comment about how much you've got so much to offer. Bishop Mark, who was chairing it, said, we need to bear in mind that you can also receive, when we were talking about Christ Church and how it might work, that you could benefit and receive from others as well as give. It's not all one-way traffic. And it shouldn't be. In the model that a New Testament church that I think we should be moving to, it is about shared stuff. Do you know, I'm really getting into the swing of this now. Right, well, we've got, as far as the hour's concerned, we've got about 5 minutes.
David's next.
Yeah, just bearing in mind what's been said already, that volunteering in this church at the moment is probably best described as a piece of stretched elastic.
Yeah.
And also bearing in mind what you've said, that you would hope and expect that we would support Jack when he starts. You haven't, in my view, really spelled out what you want from this church, this congregation, in relation to the mission communities. Do you expect us to go out to other churches, participate in events of some sort, or is it just really a case of run your own church more independent from the vicar than has traditionally been the case?
Thank you. I'm glad you've raised that, and I apologise if I've not made this particularly clear. The reason why nothing has happened on mission communities since we met in here during February, March and April of last year, we've met 3 times in here to discuss all of this, nothing has happened since, almost nil in Lee. It's been happening elsewhere. And the reason for that is because we haven't had a mission community leader to take it forward. So I think I want to say to you that it's not immediately obvious what we're asking of you, because that's partly what Jack's here for, is to work with me and other churches and you to shape the missional and growth aspiration and projects, to jointly collaborate. What frustrates me more than anything is when I see one church, what we've got to move away from is me and my church. And I know it happens everywhere. People are only concerned about me and my church. It's Christ's church, and the name of this one says it all. It's his church. So we're not asking you to go to events, necessarily. We're not asking you for Jack to go chasing round to do communion in other places, necessarily, although on occasion he might, if he's available. We're not asking any of you to do any missional work, as it were, in other places when you've got enough on your plate already going on here, and the struggle to find people to do it. What I'm asking for is for you to, when Jack sits down with me and others to plan out how this mission community might grow in its collaborative, missional and growth ambitions, and set down some kind of vision. That's what I want Jack to be involved in initially. Building relationships with other churches for a start, because not only does he have to build them here, he will have to build them with colleagues, clergy colleagues and lay colleagues in other places. He will have to attend the odd meeting here and there with me. That will take him away. But it will be designed by him and me, along with others. So we're not asking all of you to get involved immediately, but we are saying, if the Lowton connection, for instance, is something that we feel excited about and that Jack and everybody else feels there's something else we could do, we could find resource, extra resource maybe from other churches to come and help with that process. I know your PAYS teams and all of those things may be supported by other churches in the mission community, and you may be able to support somebody else. It frustrates me no end when I see one church wanting to do a messy church, for instance, and has got no resource to do it. The other church down the road wants to do the same thing. They've got no resource to do it. But between them, they've got resources to do it in one church or the other. Not me and my church, but actually somewhere. The challenge for all of us is, will you celebrate growth wherever it happens? Will you celebrate people coming to know Jesus if that does not happen here, but happens in Lowton High School? Or Atherton Parish Church, because the Spirit is active in those places? Will you celebrate it? Or is it all about, I want to grow my church? That's the challenge. You see what I'm coming from? The challenge is about growing the church, not necessarily my church. Does that... I sense you want to come back. Please do. No? Okay.
Can I just say something? I think Jack is going to find he has some fantastic people here who do all sorts of jobs, whether it's finance, music, pastoral, they're already here. The most worrying thing here and probably everywhere else, look around you.
I know.
In 10 years' time,
yeah,
I'll be 88.
Get off with you. I'm not having that. No.
What is going to happen? Where are the people? There are a handful of people in here who are probably 40. Where are those people?
You know, yes, because despite all what I've tried to say tonight, you have just summed it up brilliantly. Because we must do something about this. We must work to get younger as a church, unless somebody finds that they can find some way of reversing the age process. But you see, we have to do this, good people. We just have to. So we cannot do it on our own anymore. Yes, we need the Holy Spirit, we need God. Absolutely, we can't do anything without that. But we need other people to join us. We need to join them, they need to join us. We need to do it together. Because unless we work this out, the Church of England will be gone in 10 years or less. That's how critical this is. We have to get into the schools. We have to do that work. There's some tremendous work happening across this diocese on young people. You can be part of that joyful experience over the next 5 years.
We've got 2 more questions. One from Jim.
Jim?
Yeah. I've been thinking about a few things that's been said. This is probably going to be absolutely blasphemous, so I've got to be careful. And it's not meant to be offensive. There are people within the congregation who have had leadership roles within other churches, not necessarily the Church of England. I recognise the ordination process. I'm PCC secretary, and I saw some stuff that came through this week about people who need to be accredited in some sort of way and go to a meeting with the bishop or whatever, if they're working with communion, helping, supporting, all that sort of stuff. Yes. So I saw that coming through. Do you think there will ever be a time when people can be recognised, and maybe the word's not ordained, it's not what I'm looking for, but like a halfway house where somebody can be designated a role, which can be an approved role, where they could officiate at a communion service? if they were not ordained. Now, that's what I'm saying. I am not an Anglican by birth, by default. Big default. But I just wondered if there was any chance that you could ever be in a situation where, you know, the elements are blessed by an ordained person who, like we do when we take out communion to people who are sick. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. I absolutely get it.
Right. I apologise, by the way, if that question is offensive to people.
Yes. The honest truth is, in my lifetime, I think not. There's too much going on in the Church of England at the moment, occupying the minds on living in loving faith and all of those things. That is so challenging on both sides of the equation. I cannot see any move by the House of Bishops to even contemplate that at all in my lifetime. No, you're not. It's a legitimate question. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I know. Is this the last question?
I know you've probably perhaps covered this, but is there any obligation from the diocese coming that Jack will have to take a service here, a service there, and be running himself ragged on a Sunday morning?
No. So there's nothing laid down. There's no agreement on that, and I don't anticipate that happening. It might happen on the odd occasion when, for instance, a funeral. Funerals are the biggest problem we've got across the diocese at the moment. And Bishop Jonathan has just, part of his new role is to work in the mission community to take funerals, and that will include here. So if Jack couldn't be to go do a funeral, he might want to call on Bishop Jonathan to do it.
Yeah, whose decision will that be then? Will that be Jack's? Will that be the PCC here? Will that just evolve?
It'll evolve day to day. I mean, there's nothing to be laid down. It'll be just I'm available on Tuesday for a funeral. I'll do it for you. Or I'm actually, there's something else happening on a Sunday. I'm not down to do communion. Another church is in trouble in the Lee Mission community, and he volunteers to do it. It will not be extra work in that sense. We're not asking him to chase around other churches, no.
But if he does that, that will rely on him asking somebody here who's not licensed to preach and lead to do it.
And there we go full circle down to the problem that was highlighted.
Yeah. Okay.
Are we done? Or
I was just to say that funerals aren't our biggest problem. Funeral directors are our biggest problem.
Can I just say something in summary? Is that all right? Yeah. Can I just test something? I didn't touch it, my lord. Has that been helpful? When Stephen invited me to come here, I didn't know what kind of to expect, really. And what you've heard is a passionate invitation. And I want you to please to pray about this, to pray for Jack, and I'm sure you're doing that already, to pray about this, and to pray about how you could be involved in the unfolding future. You have got a place and a purpose, not just in here, but out there. And I'm genuinely inviting you to come and be part of it. It'll be a crying shame if you're not. But thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
If I can just say thank you to Colin for not just for coming tonight, but you may not know, but actually Colin's been a real support to Pauline and me over the last 10 months. Not just coming to do services, but being on the end of the phone and doing lots of other things. So we're very grateful to you, Colin, for everything, not just tonight.
Thank you. And
I guess if people have got questions, can they email me and pass them on?
I can. Yeah. I'm very happy to receive emails, either directly, if you've got my email address, or through Stephen. Yes, please.
Yeah, so So thank you all for coming. Lots to think about, yes, lots to pray about. But the future's, no, it isn't something to be frightened of. It's something that to be embraced, and particularly with God with us. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So thank you all very much for coming. Shall we just close by saying the grace for one another? So, may the grace
of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, evermore. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, good people. See you soon.